Hi everyone, this is the fourth session of the Consulting Interview Mastery course. In this session, we'll understand how to crack any market entry case like the top 1% candidate. See, companies are constantly under pressure to grow. So, to achieve this, they look for ways to expand into new markets or introduce new products, and that is where market entry cases come into picture. So, let's understand what different type of cases get asked in a market entry. So, first and most common type of market entry case will be entering a new geography where the question can be something like your client is a US based snack company who wants to expand into Germany. So, should they enter the market? And if so, how? Here, the company is not launching a new product. Instead, they are trying to sell an existing product to customers in new countries. Second type of market entry case can be targeting a new user segment, where the question can be something like Uber is considering launching Uber for kids. So, should they target this user segment? And if so, how? Now, here again, the company is not launching a new product. Instead, the company is trying to sell a version of an existing product to a new customer segment. And the third type of market entry case can be starting a new product or service offering, where the question can be something like a Chinese automobile company known for budget cars want to launch bike. Should they launch the product? And if so, how? So, here the company is looking to launch an entirely new product or service. Now, let's understand how do we approach a market entry case and what all do we need to consider. So, the first thing to consider is should we enter? See, this question comes first because if the opportunity is not profitable, there's no point in exploring the rest. So, the questions that we ask here are like what is the size of the market, what is the growth rate, what is the market share that we can achieve. And once we've evaluated that the answer for this is yes, only then do we proceed to the next step, which is can I enter? And here the focus is on factors which are internal to the company to gauge whether we can enter. For example, do we have significant capability gaps? And can the company leverage existing synergies with these capabilities? And are we in a financial position to enter the market? What is the initial investment like? Or does the company have the right relationship with their suppliers? Or how does the supply chain look like, right? Again, if the evaluation from can I enter is favorable, only then do we consider how to enter the market. And here there can be different ways to enter, for example, developing the capabilities internally, or partnering or forming a joint venture, or acquiring an existing company. And each strategy will have its own pros and cons. So we'll discuss all of this in detail as we move ahead in this course. So now let's dive into the first section. A very important part of should I enter is market sizing. So, what is market sizing? See, market sizing is nothing but estimating how much revenue a business can make in a specific market, and it helps us answer like how big is this opportunity and is it really worth pursuing? And see, question about market sizing can be also asked as a standalone guesstimate or more as a part of a comprehensive problem like a market entry case. So let's see how we can approach it. So we can either use a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach. In the top-down approach, we start with a total market, then narrow it down to our target. And in the bottom-up approach, we start with the unit economics. That is, we start with small and then scale up. See, if this sounds confusing, don't worry. We'll get into the detail about both the approaches one by one using very simple example. So let's start with the top-down approach. So our question is to estimate the market size of iPhones in India. Okay, let me give you 5 seconds so that you can think about the question and have some initial approach ready. See, first we will start with all our clarifying questions. So the first question that we can ask is what do we even mean by market size here? Are we focusing on the number of iPhones or their revenue? And in what time frame are we thinking about the sale of iPhone? Is it like daily, monthly, or annual sale? So let's assume that we are thinking about the revenue per year for iPhone. So the next question that we can ask is about the type of iPhone. Are we considering a specific type of iPhone like the latest version? So we can assume that we are not constrained by any such limitation and we are thinking about all type of iPhones. And since you have to determine the revenue, so let's clearly call out our assumption on the average price. So we can assume that $700 is the average price for iPhone. So let's form the goal, which is to estimate the market size of iPhone in India. Now I'll start with the high level equation and the walkthrough of the solution. So we need to estimate the revenue of iPhones sold in India in 1 year. So we'll start with the Indian population, then we'll divide it into rural and urban. Now here we will assume that the rural population will not be buying an iPhone and we will only focus on the urban population. And after that we can drill down the urban population. So we'll assume that people who are older than 15 and younger than 60 will potentially have access to mobile phones. But to get to the actual sales of iPhone, we'll have to bifurcate them into upper class, upper middle, and lower class. And then we can assume that people in the lower and lower middle will not be buying an iPhone, right? And a fraction of the upper and upper middle will be buying an iPhone. Because see, there are other competitors like Samsung, OnePlus. So next we'll take a fraction of the upper class and the upper middle class who will be buying an iPhone, and then we will sum them up to get the total number of iPhone. But see, here there is a catch. We will need to also consider the lifetime value of iPhone, because let's say people change their phones every 3 years. So we'll take that factor into account to get the yearly sales of iPhone, and then we can further multiply it with the average price to get the final revenue. I hope you are clear with the approach. So let's start putting in the numbers. See, India's population is about 1.4 billion. So let's assume 30% belong to urban area and 70% to rural area. So this gives us around 400 million people in urban area. Now to calculate the number of people between 15 to 20. So we can use the concept of uniform distribution. See, average lifespan is 0 to 80 years. So we can assume that number of people between age group 10 to 20 would be same as number of people between age group 20 to 30, since we are assuming uniform distribution. So number of urban people between 15 to 60 can be like 60 minus 15, which will be 45. So 45 by 18 to 400 million, which is 225 million urban people. Now we need to bifurcate them into all these four categories. So let's assume 10% belong to upper class, 20% to upper middle, 30% to lower middle, and 40% to lower class. But see, not all the 23 million that we saw in upper class or the other 45 million in upper middle will buy an iPhone. So we'll assume that only 40% in the upper class will buy an iPhone and only 20% in the upper middle will buy an iPhone. And we had already called out that the lower middle and lower class won't be buying an iPhone. So this gives us close to 18.2 million people who will be buying an iPhone. But we'll also divide it by 3 because the average lifetime of an iPhone is 3 years. So that will give us 6 million iPhones sold yearly in India. Now we'll multiply it with $700 so that we can get the market size, which will be close to $4.2 billion. So this is an example of a top-down approach where we started with the total population and systematically narrowed it down to our target segment, which was urban, age 15 to 20, and then further into upper and upper middle class. I hope you are clear with the concept of top-down approach. So now let us take another example where we'll use a bottom-up approach. So the question is to estimate the revenue of PVR cinema. Please pause the video and take a few minutes to think about the question and have some initial approach ready. And again, we'll start with the clarifying questions. So the very first question which we can ask is just to get a good understanding of PVR cinema. So let me quickly explain for those who don't know. Like PVR Cinema is an Indian multiplex chain where we can go and watch movies. So the questions that we can ask here is, does it include all multiplex in the chain or a single multiplex? Because revenue will be different, right? So we can assume that we're talking about a single multiplex. Now, since you have to calculate the revenue of single multiplex, it is important to clarify the understanding of multiplex, like where is it located. So why I'm asking this is because if it is located in a busy area, then the occupancy will be high. But if it is in a non-busy area, then people might not choose to go and the occupancy will be lower. So let's assume it's in a metro city in a busy area. The next question that we can ask is about the size of the multiplex, like how many screens are there. So let's assume that it is a big multiplex with total 10 screens. And the fourth question that we can ask is what type of revenue sources are we considering? So we can assume that we are considering revenue from primary services as well as ancillary services, but we are not taking ads into account for ease of calculation. But see, if this was asked to you as a standalone question, please consider revenue from ads. And the final question that we'll ask is what is the time frame that we are looking at? So let's assume that we're talking about a single day on the weekend like Sunday. So I hope you are with me till now. So we'll summarize and form the goal, which is to estimate the daily revenue of PVR multiplex in a busy area from all type of services except ads. And see, in this example, I'm not really doing a market sizing for PVR, but we're just discussing how we can approach this problem from a bottom-up method. So again, we'll start with a high-level equation and the walkthrough of the solution. So you have to calculate the revenue from a multiplex. We can start by assuming that the PVR multiplex starts from 9 in the morning till 12 midnight, right? So that will be close to 15 hours. And in general, we can assume that, let's say, one show is of 3 hours, including the cleaning time. Here, we'll get the number of movies we can play in one day in one screen. And now we can get the total number of movies that can be on 10 screens in the day. Not all movies will be 100% occupied, right? So we'll consider the occupancy rate as well. And this will help us with the estimated footfall in the PVR multiplex. So till now, we have the total number of people that come to watch movie in an entire day in PVR multiplex. Now, to get the total revenue, we will bifurcate the revenue into revenue from movies, revenue from parking, and revenue from food and beverages. And then we'll sum it up to get the total revenue in the day. I hope you're with me till here. And now we'll also start putting in the numbers. So from morning 9 to midnight 12, that will give us 15 hours of operations. And one movie can take approximately 3 hours. So that will give us 5 movie shows on a single screen. And since we have 10 screens, so the total screenplay would be around 50. Now let's assume that the occupancy is around 90%. See, this is the average number because it's a Sunday and our PVR is in a busy area. So the total footfall would be 50 into 0.9 into 200. And 200 is the number of seats for one screen. So that will give us total 9,000 people that are visiting our PVR. Now, to get the revenue from ticket, what we'll do is we'll multiply it with the average ticket cost. So let's assume that close to 300 rupees is our average ticket cost. So that gives us 9,000 into 300, which is close to 27 lakh rupees. Now, to calculate the parking revenue, see, not everyone will be opting for parking space, and people also come as a family or in groups. So we can assume that on an average, the group size is around 3. So we will get 3,000 groups. And among these, we can assume that only 50% will opt for parking because people can come via public transport or maybe Uber. And on an average, the parking charge is around 50 rupees. So that will give us 9,000 by 3, the 3,000 groups into the parking charges into 50%. That will be close to 75,000 rupees from parking. And finally, to calculate the revenue from food and beverages, again, we can assume that people will come in group of 3 and only few people will buy food and beverages. So let's assume 30% will buy food and beverages and the average spend is close to 500 rupees. So that gives us close to 4.5 lakhs from food and beverages. So adding all of this, we get around 32 lakh rupees. That is the revenue of a PVR on Sunday. Let's quickly summarize all the steps that we've done here. See, we'll start by asking all the clarification questions and we'll state the key assumptions. Next, we'll define our goal very clearly. Third, we'll choose the approach and then give a walkthrough of the steps that we're going to take. And after that, we need to show the step-by-step calculations and arrive at a final answer. Then it is also important to sense check and validate. See, all this might seem a bit daunting, so don't worry. We have a whole playlist of questions where we have covered market sizing and a lot of guesstimate questions which you can watch. And the more you start practicing these questions from different industries, the better you will become. So I'm going to share the link of our playlist in the description below. Now we will move on to the next step of market entry, which is to decide, can I enter? And here we'll assess if the company has the capabilities to successfully enter the market. See, the market can be attractive and our competition can be weak. But what if we don't have the right capabilities? Then we won't be able to successfully compete in the market. And there are a number of different factors which we should consider while we're assessing the company's capabilities. So we can start with the internal capability assessment. And here the key questions that we ask are in terms of resources, do we have enough money, people, technology, or in terms of expertise, do we understand the market culture, regulations, or in terms of operations, how strong is our supply chain? And a great tool to use here is SWOT analysis, where we look at the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. The next stage is to check for external barriers. And the key questions to ask here are, what is our competition like? Who dominates the market? What are the legal hurdles? Or are there any government norms? What are the local preferences? Are there any homegrown brands which have an edge? And a great tool to use here is PESEL analysis, which looks at political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal factors. The third aspect is financial feasibility. And the key question to ask here is, in terms of cost, what are the upfront investments? What are the expected profit? How long will it take us to break even? When will we recover our cost? And a good approach here is to perform the cost benefit analysis. And finally, an overall risk assessment, where the key questions are like, what if things go wrong? What are the failure risks? What should be our exit strategy? For example, if we acquire a local firm, can we sell it later? And a good approach is to use a 2 by 2 risk analysis framework where we consider the likelihood or the probability of risk and its impact. And see, I'm not covering any of these tools like SWOT or PESTLE, but I will link the videos where we have a whole playlist of business strategy and we've covered each of these in detail. Let me make this simple with an example. Let's say our client is a plant-based meat brand in US and they want to enter the China market. We are assuming that the market is big enough and let's look at how we can enter. So one internal factor can be, do we have people in our sales team who understand the culture and language of the China market that we are planning to enter? An external factor to consider here will be, does Chinese government allow importing plant-based meat? A financial assessment here could be, can we price competitively versus local tofu brands? And finally, risk could be, what if Chinese consumers don't like our taste, right? And see, I have shared a list of all potential questions, but you don't need to check for everything. What you can do is you can list down the sections and then ask the interviewer which section we should go in detail. And it can also happen that the interviewer might ask you to choose which section should we go in detail. So have a logical approach ready. Now, once we have decided that entering the market is a good idea, it is important to develop the strategy on how to enter. So our first option is organic entry or a greenfield investment. Here, the company independently establishes their operations in the new market by building their presence from scratch. See, this involves creating all these new facilities, distribution network, or brand awareness, all from scratch. The next option is a joint venture or a partnership approach. Here, the company will collaborate with the existing local firms to enter the market together, and this helps the company in getting the local partners' market knowledge and their existing infrastructure. And the third option is acquisition, where the company purchases an existing business in the target market so that they get immediate access to their customer base and the market position. To determine the best market strategy, we should weigh in four critical factors. See, starting with the cost, where we are looking at our capital and operational expense. So, for organic entry, there are high upfront costs because we need to set up our facilities from scratch. But once we have established ourselves in the market, the recurring cost can be low. Talking about joint ventures, here there will be shared costs with the local partners. But remember, you will also have to share profits on a regular basis, so this can reduce margin. Talking about acquisition, while there are no organic costs, but acquisition often require paying a very heavy amount upfront to buy an existing company. Talking about the second factor, which is the speed or the time to market. So organic can be slow because it can take 2 to 5 years for a company to establish themselves. See, like Starbucks, they took almost 3 years to turn profitable in China. And joint ventures can be a bit more faster than organic, but they can also take 6 to 18 months because sometimes negotiations can be delayed. For example, the Tata and Starbucks joint venture in India that allowed Starbucks to enter India market fast while leaning on Tata's strengths. And acquisition can provide instant access to the market. For example, Walmart acquired Flipkart to immediately dominate the Indian e commerce market. Now, talking about the third factor, which is control over the branding, quality, or pricing. So, organic definitely provides full control over operations. For example, Apple still retains 100% control over its global stores. But joint venture involves shared decision making and sometimes can lead to conflicts as well. So, there's medium control. And talking about acquisition, it depends on the integration that is happening. For example, Microsoft still allows LinkedIn to operate autonomously post acquisition. So it's a different kind of model here. Now, talking about the last factor, which is risk in terms of regulatory or let's say cultural risk. So, here organic provides high risks because the markets are unknown, right? And you don't have any local allies. For example, when McDonald's launched in India, so they had to deeply localize themselves by offering products like Mekalu Tikki or Paneer Burger so that they can reduce the risk. Joint venture helps us lower the risk because the partners are able to handle the local challenges. But sometimes there can be reputation risk, right? If the partners are not performing well. And acquisition often helps us to mitigate the competition risk, but sometimes integrating the new acquired player, there can be cultural clashes within the company. So let me again explain this with a very simple example. Let's say our client is Tesla and they want to enter the Indian market. So how should they enter the market? See, again, I'm going to skip the previous steps and directly discuss about how Tesla can enter the market. There can be two options, right? First can be an organic entry, which is building its own factories or store. And the second can be partnering with Tata. And why I'm considering Tata here is because Tata is the highest seller of EV in India. So now let's quickly evaluate each of the options. See, the benefit of organic entry is that it will allow full control over branding, supply chain, and it will also align with Tesla's global playbook of having its own gigafactories. The benefit of partnership is that Tesla will be able to leverage Tata's existing plants and Tata's local expertise in terms of Indian regulations and customer preferences. But the disadvantage is that the organic approach can take almost 3 to 5 years for Tesla to set up the manufacturing, and there'll be like really high upfront cost for battery or vehicle production. And let's say that in the long run, if EV demand does not pick up, then this can lead to underutilized capacity. And the disadvantage of partnership with Tata is that Tesla can lose its standalone premium brand identity. And other than that, Tata can also demand a 50% partnership or royalty fees. So let's see what we can finally recommend to Tesla. And see, please note that it is not that we have to only pick up one option, like either a organic entry or a partnership. So what we can do here is that in the short term, Tesla can start importing these high-end models for the luxury buyer so that they can test demand. And in the medium term, they can partner with Tesla for local production, where they can maybe ship their semi-built cars and Tata can help assemble them locally. And in the long run, if demand really picks up, then Tesla can consider setting up a full-scale gigafactory. So now it's time to solve a full-fledged market entry case end to end. So let's move back to our case. Our client is a dating company who wants to enter the Indian market, and we have to help the client evaluate this opportunity. Please pause and think through some of the clarification questions that come to your mind. The first question that we can ask is, what is the goal or objective of our client when they are trying to enter the Indian market? And remember, don't just ask the interviewer, give your own hypothesis. So here I can think that India's youth population is really growing, and so is their disposable income. So India has a high growth potential. And the interviewer confirms that our thinking is correct. The client is looking at India's growth potential and hence long term gains. The next question to ask is, what is the product that our client offers? Do we have an app or website? And another thing is, what is our current business model? So the interviewer tells us that we are considering mobile app for now and we offer a freemium model. So we can upgrade to premium version for any additional features. The next question is, in what geographies are client currently in, and is there a customer segment that they are targeting or addressing? So the interviewer tells us that our client is in the US market, and while there is no specific target group, but we can focus on 15 to 45 age group as they are more likely to be on a dating app. Now we will also want to understand what is the competition like in the market that our client wants to enter. So the interviewer tells us that there are three major players in the Indian market which who have a 70% market share, and the rest is fragmented. And finally, we also try to understand, like, is there a unique value prop that our client has which can differentiate it from others? So the interviewer tells us that as of now we can consider it similar to dating apps like Tinder or Bumble. So let's quickly summarize all the information that we've gathered. So our client is an online dating app operating on a freemium model based out of the US, and they want to enter the Indian market and earn long-term profits. So next we'll discuss on a high-level approach on how we will solve this question. So again, as we had discussed earlier, we will look at should the client enter, where we'll gauge how big is the market and what are the market conditions. Next, we look at if the market has potential, then we'll assess our internal strengths, like can we really enter? How good is our technology? How is our brand perceived? And things like that. And the final logical step will be to look at how to enter. So we can look at organic ways to grow ourselves or maybe partnerships with the existing players. So we will start with our market sizing first. So here, what we have to do is we have to calculate the users of a dating app in India. So we will bifurcate the Indian population into different age groups. And we will look at the internet and smartphone penetration for each of the age groups. And we're ignoring the 0 to 15 and above 45 because we had already clarified that our target group is 15 to 45 years, right? And after that, we will break them down into male and female separately. Now, you must be wondering why this is important. See, female population usually has a lesser affinity of joining an online dating app, and the gender distribution is definitely skewed. So we should take that into account. And also, we need to look at the percentage of male and female. From this, we will look at how many are actually willing to date, and then we will have to look at how many are actually willing to use a dating app. Then we will sum this up to get the total number of users, and we'll take a percentage of total users to find our monthly active users. So let's start putting in the numbers. So India's population will be 1.4 billion, and we can assume that 20% lie in less than 15 age group, and then 25% each in the 15 to 30 and 30 to 45 age group. And finally, 30% in the age group greater than 45 years. See, these are rough percentages that I've assumed, and the interviewer will also be more interested in your approach, but you can always take their buy in. So now we will focus on the 15 to 45 age group as we had discussed earlier. And the internet and smartphone penetration can be different in these two age groups. So I'm assuming 60% in the age group of 15 to 30 and 40% in the age group of 30 to 45. So this will give us 210 million and 140 million respectively. Now, here is the tricky part, so please listen carefully. See, we had divided our age group into male and female. And if you just try to think of it logically, see, 15 to 30 age group male, they have the highest affinity to date, and they are most likely to be on the dating app compared to females in the same age group. And similarly, when we talk about men in the age group of 30 to 45, they still have lesser affinity as compared to males in 15 to 30 age group. And finally, women who are in the 30 to 45 age group, they will have the least affinity. Take a minute and just eyeball all the numbers that I'm trying to put in here because there are certain percentage assumptions that I've taken here. Finally, we will add all of this up and our number will come out to be close to 58 million. Now we will assume that close to 60% of them will engage with our app monthly. So this gives us 35 million active users. And the interviewer shares with us that Tinder has close to 70 to 80 million active users. So this looks like a good market size. Now we also should start thinking what is the market share our client can gain in the next 1 year. So we can estimate it using some public data, like again, how much is it that Tinder gained in 1 year? Because our client's app is similar to Tinder. Or another way can be, let's say if our client had entered any emerging market like India, then how much market share had they gained in the past? So let's say our interviewer tells us that Tinder was able to gain close to 8 to 10% market share. So we can think on similar lines. To summarize, the market size is attractive for our client to enter the Indian market. Next, we are going to look at all these external factors, internal strengths, financial feasibility, and the risks to understand if we can enter. So the interviewer tells us that we can focus only on the external factors and the internal strengths for now. Starting with the external factors, we will understand if our client should enter or not. First, we can start looking at any legal factors or any government rules, maybe regarding data security or data privacy, because our client is in a dating business. And we should make sure that we are abiding by all the policies which are set by the Indian government. We might have to make necessary changes here. The next is talking about the economic conditions. This seems favorable as there is an increase in spending on the discretionary goods by Indian youth because of their rising disposable income. Now, talking about social factors. So, in tier 1 cities, the social stigma regarding dating is slowly fading with more westernization coming in. But in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, it is still at a very nascent stage. And talking about technological factors, there is an uneven internet access across India, but with Geo's advent, this is definitely improving. Overall, we can conclude that the external factors do look favorable for our client to enter the Indian market. Next, we will look at the internal factors to understand our client's capabilities. Here, talking about internal factors, I'm thinking about brand value and the technological capabilities that our client has. See, because these two things are going to play a major role as we are an online dating company. Speaking about the brand value, we can think about the unique value proposition which our client offers, as well as what is their social media presence. So let's say that the interviewer tells us that their USP is that they are planning to launch an audio feature so that they can cater to Indians specifically. And our client also got some insight via initial surveys that Indian audience is more comfortable with audio rather than chatting. And in fact, our client is also planning to enable localization so that they can support popular languages like Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, Bengali, right? So this will help them reach the masses. In terms of brand value, the information that we got is our client already has a rich social media presence. They have close to 4 million followers on Instagram, and close to 20% of them are Indians. So they do have an edge here. Talking about technological capabilities, the interviewer asks us what factors we can think of. So we can think of factors like safety, relevancy, ease of payment, and we find out that our client is already popular for their safety related features. For example, they are focused a lot on content moderation, and they have integrated a model which helps them identify any offensive behavior on the platform. And talking about relevancy, so what we can also recommend is, because our client wants to enter the India market, so they can think of some culturally relevant matching experience, because in India people like to find matches based on their language, location, community, and things like that, right? And talking about payment integration, so here our client should use UPI as a payment option because UPI is one of the most prevalent amongst our tech savvy online users. And we should also consider providing some free trial periods for our premium features so that Indian users can experience them before they start paying for them. Another thing that comes to my mind is we can also consider sachet pricing because see, Indians are very price sensitive. So let's say if we have a feature like pay 10 rupees for a 30-minute chat, right? And it can be an audio based chat feature that we can enable for them. Overall, it seems like the factors on technological capabilities and good brand image, these are favorable for our client and this can help them enter the Indian market. So now the interviewer wants us to devise a strategy on how we can enter. See, given that our client is a well known brand, so they already have some Instagram followers. So we can look at maybe a referral system that they can launch in India, which can help them increase downloads. So the way I'm thinking about this is when all these companies like Google Pay or let's say food commerce companies launch. So they started getting more users via referral method where they would offer, let's say, some virtual currency which can be redeemed in the app itself. Another thing that we can also think about is creating more local content, which is India specific, right? And we can maybe leverage gamification on social media so that we can build a community. So this will help us create like a strong brand presence and will also provide a sustainable growth. In terms of exploring partnerships, we can partner with, let's say, famous influencers based out of India. And these can also be some regional influencers. For example, if we want to target the west part of India, then maybe we can have some Mumbai based influencers who are in the age group of 20 to 30. And then we can also leverage specific brand collaborations with local shows. For example, what if Amazon Prime or a YouTube channel in India is planning to launch some college romance shows, right? So there they can promote our dating app. So our final recommendation to the client is yes, they should enter the India market, but with a more localized product, which is let's say audio based and there is language support and they can follow an aggressive influencer market strategy, but they should also focus on the safety branding. And in the short term they can again target to capture close to 8 to 10% share, which is what Tinder had captured in its early days. And in the long term, as we expand to tier 2 and tier 3 markets via vernacular features and audio based engagement, then we can get more growth. I hope you've learned something new from this video and please subscribe to our channel if you really liked our explanation. And in the next session, we are going to cover how to solve pricing case interviews and you can buy our entire course and become the top 1% consulting interview candidates. I'll meet you in the next one. Until that, keep learning and keep watching.